Welcome to Hidden History, Stories from the Secret City. I'm Keith McDaniel, along with my co-host, Ray Smith. Good afternoon, Ray.
Hello, Keith. Good afternoon to you, and good morning to our guest, Don Farrell.
That's exactly right. Don is on the other side of the world, as a matter of fact.
That's a good thing about Zoom. We can do this, and this may be the most long distance Zoom that we've done. We,
I think
we
it
you know
is.
we did Dick Groves when he was in the Netherlands,
Yeah.
but this one is even further than that. Don Farrell is on Tinian Island, and I met Don when the Stephen Ambrose historical tours of the Manhattan Project when they came through Oak Ridge. Now that tour goes from Oak Ridge and it'll go to Los Alamos, it'll go to Hanford, it'll go to the Trinity site, and it covers all of the Manhattan Project sites, major ones
Mhm.
that are in the United States. And Don was the historian on that tour, and I met him when he was coming through. We struck up a good relationship, I believe, and I ordered. He's got about four books out now, and I've got one of them here, and he's going to talk about his newest one today. Don, we're really glad to have you with us today.
Well, thank you very much, Ray and Keith. I'm very pleased to be here. It's, as you mentioned, we are the farthest territory, the outpost of America in the Western Pacific. It's from us, it's almost a baseball shot from here to Taiwan.
Oh,
Uh, right? But the sun's just now coming up, and it's going to be a beautiful day here on Tinian, and this is a great way to start the day. Glad to be with you, Ray.
all
Keith?
right. Very good. Well, let's get started. Let's talk a little about the books that you've already published. Let me bring up a screen
Let
shot
me,
for us here.
while you're doing that, Ray, let me ask Don a
Oh,
question. Don, how long have
okay.
you been there, and how did you end up there?
Oh, I came out to Guam in January 1977
Okay.
um, as a contract school teacher. 1976, a huge super typhoon swept across Guam, looped the loop, and came back again. Whatever wasn't loosened up, they tore up,
Mm.
and it blew away a lot of the houses that teachers were staying in at that time, and so they needed replacement teachers. And I looked it up in the encyclopedia. This was long before internet. Found a GU, and then it had a little flag on it, and I said, "Well, it must be American. They must speak English." And then I saw the precise location of it, and I said, "My goodness, that's coral reef country. Jacques Cousteau, watch out, here I come." And so I moved to Guam in January '77.
Wow.
How
And
about
then I lived there for 10 years. I met my wife there, who is a Tinian Chamorro, and we moved to Tinian in '87, and I've been here ever since.
wow.
Right.
Wow. How
Very good.
amazing. Well, here are the books that you've written: Tinian and the Bomb, Liberation 1944, and Saipan. Tell us just a little about your about those books before we get into your new one.
All right, I'm going to begin with Liberation 1944.
Okay.
That is one of a three-book series. Uh, the first two in the series, I did not send you covers of. The Americanization of Guam, 1898 to 1918, and then the Sacrifice of Guam, 1919 to 1943. Then that was followed by Liberation 1944, which we published in 1984 at the 40th anniversary. And now here we are at the 80th anniversary, and I'm still kicking.
Mm.
Right now, I'm finishing up the fourth and final volume in that series called The Reconstruction of Guam, 1944 to 1950. And I wrote that series. The book on the right, Saipan, A Brief History. We've also done Tinian, A Brief History, Rhoda, A Brief History. And those are shorter paperback books. that describe the brief history of each of those major islands in the Northern Marianas. And we just completed Guam, a brief history, which will be released in December. Tinian and the bomb, that was a long pet project of mine. Living here on Tinian, as I say in the opening of that book, I live on East 46th Street, just off Broadway, but not New York City, on Tinian. The bomb pits are about 15 minutes from my house. And I got addicted to the story of the bombs and why on Tinian. And then, of course, it took me a long time just to try to decide how I was going to write such a controversial story, because I was writing that back in the late 90s. And, you know, a lot of writers were saying we didn't need to use the bomb. And so I had to consider it. I wrote to my dad, who drove a landing craft at Iwo Jima, Okinawa, right? And he said, those damn bombs saved our lives, because he was quite sure that his unit would never survive a third invasion. So that was the attitude I took, that the bomb was used to save lives.
Hey, Don, let me interrupt real quick.
Sure.
We may have some young viewers who do not know the significance of Tinian Island. So just in a nutshell, can you tell us why Tinian Island is important during World War II?
Well, first of all, it was very isolated, right? Nobody would have expected anything major to be happening from such a tiny little island that belonged to the Japanese, and we had just taken it from them.
Right.
Number two, the island was chosen because Guam, when the Manhattan Project team, the 509th Bomb Group, moved to Tinian, was ready to move to the Pacific, Guam didn't have any runways ready to go, much to General LeMay's discomfort.
Right.
But Tinian was ready to go.
And
so Tinian was chosen.
Yeah, and Tinian was chosen for what?
Was chosen for the place where they would actually assemble the bombs. The bombs were not assembled in America. Right. They actually brought Los Alamos to Tinian. Mm-hmm. Many of the best of the scientists and technicians at Oak Ridge, at Los Alamos, and at Hanford were brought to Tinian, 100 of them in a team called Project Alberta. And their job was to prepare for Operation Centerboard, the plan to drop atomic bombs. So that's why Tinian was chosen. It was isolated, it had space, and it had 12,500 Seabees who could help build the facilities necessary for the Manhattan Project.
Okay, all right, thank you. I appreciate that.
That's quite all right. Fire away, I'm having fun.
Yeah, on the title of his book, Tinian and the Bomb, you notice Project Alberta and Operation Centerboard is mentioned in the title. So that's all covered in that book, Tinian and the Bomb.
Right.
All right. You want to move now to the new book?
Yes, please.
All right.
All right. Seabees and Superforts. Seabees and Superforts is actually a sequel to Tinian and the Bomb. I probably should have written them in the other order, but I wasn't ready to do that. But this is the story of, it's actually the definitive history of Tinian during World War II. Tinian was captured by the Japanese, right? It had some rudimentary runways on it, but the Japanese had not really developed it. So the 5th Naval Construction Brigade, right, was sent to Tinian, and their job was to build Northfield as fast as possible to be able to get B-29s on the ground so that they could get them back in the air and start the bombing of Japan. The 73rd Bomb Wing was already established on Saipan, right? But had been quite ineffective. The 313th was brought to Tinian. 4 runways were built here, so it was a complete air base. In fact, it was the largest air base in World War II. And they began building runways. The B-29s were ready to go, and they sent them out here, even though the runways weren't truly complete. So that's what is depicted here on the cover of the book. on the front cover, we see a photograph of 3 of the planes from the 313th Bomb Wing, the very first planes to arrive on Tinian, making a pass over runway Able, what would become runway Able. And they had to chase the Seabees off the runway because they were still working on it. You can see the guy on the tractor, they're waving at him. And when it got on the ground, there was mayhem on the runway, and nobody could stop it. Those Seabees that had been working on the runway had been busting their buns, getting that runway ready to go, and they made the deadline. 10 hours a day, 2 shifts a day, 7 days a week. And so they saw this big bird. They had never seen one before. They'd only heard about it. And so they ran out there and they jumped on the airplane, and we got that beautiful picture of all of those hardworking Seabees. Most of them kids, should have been home playing football and chasing girls. Right. And so they jumped up on that airplane and said, "This is ours." They put their logo on it, the Black Cat. That's their 13th Battalion. And the story just follows along with that.
So what is a CB?
I'm sorry?
What is a CB?
What are the Seabees? Oh my goodness, yes, of course. The Seabees were created at the very beginning of the war by Admiral Farrell, who a Navy guy, obviously, and he recognized that they were going to need some kind of a construction teams to replace the civilian contractors that had been there before the war, because you couldn't use civilians during the war anymore. So he created this unit called a CB battalion. And, well, they weren't called CBs. They were called Naval Construction Battalions. The first one was sent to Bora Bora, right, down where they were creating a runway to help protect Australia against the Japanese invasion. And they were initially called Bobcats. And then they earned the name, the nickname CBs from construction battalions.
Right. Okay. Very good.
All right. Now let's go to the next picture here and let you talk about it.
Yeah, well, there's no controlling Mother Nature. And this is the tropics. And they were working through the rainy season. So here is one of the very first groups to arrive, battalions to arrive. Now, these battalions were individually created, but had the same training that came out of Port Hueneme, right? The port of departure, port of embarkation for all service people leaving for the Pacific. And here they were trying to build their camp, and it was rainy. The bulldozers had cleared off an area, pushed off the brush, and there they are creating their camp. And that's where they would live, and then travel to Northfield to work on Northfield every day.
All right.
And there's, of course, a picture of Lon Ashworth and the rest of his team arriving on Tinian, and the guy stops his dozer, taking a look at the aircraft coming in. Oh, now this is right at the end of the war. I love this photograph. The guy over on the right, his name is Phil Barnes. He flew on the first mission, the Hiroshima mission. All right, the other 3 guys are all part of the Project Alberta team. Well, the war has just been declared over. They've all got a warm bottle of beer, and they're sitting in front of their hooch up at Northfield, celebrating the end of the war and getting ready to go home. I always like the guy in the middle down there at the front looks so much like, what's his name? Penn, the actor?
Sean Penn.
Sean
Yeah.
Sean
Yeah.
Penn. Yeah.
Yeah.
He does. That's for sure.
How about that? He does.
And that's Tinian at the end of the war again. It shows the massive development of Northfield. If you look down in the bottom right-hand corner towards the very northern tip of Tinian, right down here, yes, there, 1, 2, 3. Those are the three assembly buildings. Now back just above it, you'll see a little square patch right there. No, back over where you were. It's right. No, up. There's a square patch right next to where the hard stands are. And that is the high-tech area. That is the area where all of the parts, believe it or not, sufficient parts were sent to Tinian to build 50 bombs.
Wow.
Now, a lot of there's the high-tech area. That is actually the area for the first Ordnance Squadron Special, which was created and attached to the 509th Bomb Group, right? And that's about 13 huts in there. And in there, they received all of the parts for the bomb, and then they created sub-assemblies. And then just straight down the road from the assembly buildings is atomic bomb pits area where the bombs were actually loaded.
Wow.
This area here.
Oh, up here, this is all service area. If you look just inside, you see a little Y there, what looks like a little Y and the two hard stands on it. That's the hard stand. That's right there, right there. Okay. That's where the atomic bombs were loaded. So they had the high-tech area, the assembly building area, and the atomic bomb loading pits. Those were the three portions of the atomic bomb project, the Manhattan Project, that were assembled on Guam, created on Tinian, to be able to process, load, and help deliver the atomic bombs to Japan. The rest of that up there, that's all service area for the 200 B-29s that were on Tinian by then. And then if you look up towards the south end of Tinian, we're looking north to south, you'll see Westfield up there. That was home to the 58th Bomb Wing. So altogether, there were 2 bomb wings on Tinian for 400 B-29s, all operational. And in the middle there, you'll see a little, what looks like a rows of a park area. That's the central bomb dump. There's another bomb dump over on the left-hand side of the island, way down south. But yeah, that's the Masalik bomb dump, right along the edge there on the coastline. That's right there. That's another bomb dump. That's the Masalik bomb dump. That had the bombs for the 58th Wing, right? The central bomb dump had all the bombs for Northfield. By the end of the war, Admiral Nimitz had given the order that there would be no less than 60,000 tons of bombs on Tinian at any time. What? Why? Because when General LeMay ran his incendiary bombing of Japan from Tinian and Saipan, Tinian ran out of bombs. Nimitz couldn't believe it. And LeMay said, I'd be bombing if I had bombs. And he complained to General Arnold, complained to Admiral Nimitz. And so Nimitz promised to always have no less than 60,000 tons of bombs ready for use on Tinian.
Hey, Don, let me ask you a question. Now that we're looking at this aerial photograph, how big is Tinian? I mean,
Tinian is about 12 miles from the north tip to the south tip.
Okay.
And it ranges from about 4 to 8 miles wide.
Okay.
So 29 square miles altogether.
Okay. Very good.
Wow. That's amazing.
So did anyone live on Tinian? Any civilians live on Tinian when all this was going on?
No.
It was all
there were civilians left on Tinian. At the time that Tinian was captured, there were 18,000 Okinawans, Japanese from the home islands, and Koreans on Tinian working for the sugarcane factory, and private businesses had developed here. Japan had tremendously increased Tinian and its value. They saw the value in Tinian because it was flat, right? And so they turned it into their major sugarcane producer. There was more sugarcane twice as much sugarcane produced on Tinian than Saipan because it's flat. So there were civilians here. A camp was created called Camp Chulu. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see two major roads running from north to south. That one on the right, that's 8th Avenue, and the one over on the left is Broadway. And those two roads came from the port all the way north, across, and then back down the island. And it became a circuit for the trucks bringing people and material and equipment from the harbor to Northfield, and taking the scraps back down to get another load. So there was a giant circle, and there were one-way streets with guards on the streets. There's a funny story about a guard standing at one of the gates on one of the passing areas on Broadway, and a Jeep pulled up, and the guard said, "You can't pull in here. You'll have to go back the other way." And the guy who was riding in the Jeep stood up and he said, "Do you know who I am?" And he said, "Sir, I don't care who the hell you are. You get out of here or I'm going to shoot you." Well, it was General LeMay. Oh. And he turned around and went the other way. He obeyed the regulation.
Oh, that's good. All right. Oh, let's go this way.
Yeah, that's all the guys up on that's top of
all the CBs.
Yeah, the Black Cat B-29.
Wow.
You know what? And what happened was they adopted the guys from this battalion adopted the people, the crew and the plane, including their ground crew. Huh. And those guys always had the best food on the island because it was cooked in the CBs, and they made sure that those were taken care of. Here are some of the refugees, right, that came out of the jungle afterwards. And this is a sad story. I tell this story in depth because it is amazing what the CBs, the Marines were able to do along with the CBs to help these poor people. They had been living the good life on Tinian up until the war. And they had all lived well, and they were obviously married and had children. Their grandparents were with them, and a lot of them died during those terrible days from the time the island was first bombed until they could get to the safety of the camp. The sad part of the story is these people watched their friends, family, co-workers jump from the cliff. Mm. Believing that the Marines, the Japanese propaganda that the Marines were animals, criminals, taken from prison. They were murderers and rapists. And if captured, that they would rape the women and eat their babies, all of that kind of stuff. And here come the Marines and the CBs, as these guys started to come out of the jungle, handing them a cup of water out of their own canteen, handing them sea rations out of their own pack. And they were sick to their stomach. One, because they had lost relatives, during the time that they were in the caves from the battle of shooting and everything like that. Most of these babies did not survive. They were too sick to be recovered. Many did make it, but a lot passed. And so these people forever afterwards remembered that they were lied to by their government, that the Marines were not animals and the Americans were in fact good people. And at the end of this particular chapter, and I give them a complete separate chapter, it's the history of Camp Chulu. It's the history of these people from the time they arrived on the island until they were put on the plane headed home. And I state in there quite categorically that the United States Marines who took care of these guys were in fact America's first ambassadors to Japan, because by the time they left to go home, they knew what the Americans really were.
Yeah. Mm. Oh, great story.
All right, these are the civilians, a group of the civilians that were on Tinian. There's their house back in the background. Excuse me. And this is a family that was here. They had a small business, and they obviously were doing quite well. It's fun to see the kids down there playing just like kids do, right? And then the family all serious, the way the Japanese take their pictures, they all look serious, except that one guy back in their back, third from the right, and he's got a smirk on his face. I like that. And I love studying these pictures and seeing what they're wearing and the attitudes they have. But this just simply depicts a period of time. Now, obviously, this was taken long before the actual invasion. But I did want to show that these were good people, hardworking people, farmers, laborers, but shop owners as well, who had come to call Tinian home. And the descendants of these people, the Micronesian Repatriation Association, comes back to Tinian every year to pray and remember what happened to their ancestors.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my.
Now, this is a subject that is not often touched. We are working on reestablishing this now. We were working with the Japanese government, but that is the Japanese war dead cemetery that happens to be immediately adjacent to the American cemetery, the American war dead cemetery. And we just had the reopening ceremony for the American cemetery. We did that on Veterans Day. But now we're working with the Japanese to allow them to, there's no sign there right now. This was taken, long time ago. All right, but we're leaving it up to the Japanese on how they want to handle it. They, of course, will have to work with Naval Facilities Engineering Command and the others here on Tinian and from Guam to make sure that they follow all the regulations. But we do want to make sure that we remember to respect the Japanese war dead, because Japan, of course, is now our most important ally in Asia. This picture was taken right before the fleet was sent to Tarawa, and that is I love this picture. That's Admiral Nimitz on the left, Admiral King, Commander-in-Chief of the United States Navy, both the Atlantic and the Pacific. And then on the right, that's Admiral Turner, the Spruance rather, who was Commander-in-Chief of what had been called the Pacific Fleet and then was renamed the Fifth Fleet. And of course, they are there. They're actually aboard Admiral Spruance's flagship, the Indianapolis.
Oh, my. The Indianapolis. Oh, my goodness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what a story.
Yeah. Tell that one quickly.
Well, it's, my goodness, I don't know exactly, what to say about that. All right. But bottom line is that Admiral Spruance was given the job of leading the fleet. And during the Battle of Okinawa, the Indianapolis took a bad hit. And was repaired, and then went back out. And during their second tour, as it left Guam, headed to the Philippines to join the fleet for the still planned invasion of Japan. A submarine, one of the last Japanese submarines in the Pacific, happened to be in the ocean at the same time. And as the Indianapolis crossed from Guam to the Philippines, he put 4 torpedoes in her and she went right down. the Charles Butler McVeigh, Captain Charles Butler McVeigh III. He was later, of course, exonerated, right? But he was blamed for the sinking of the Indianapolis because they were not zigzagging at the time. And then the prosecution against McVeigh was allowed to bring in the Japanese commander of that submarine, and he testified openly that it wouldn't have made any difference whether he was zigzagging or not because the submarine was right on top of him and he would have sunk it anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So it didn't make any difference.
Yeah.
But it ruined his career, and he eventually committed suicide over it. And it was Admiral King, first off, who recommended that he should not have been convicted. It was hard for the courts to accept the fact, but it was totally a kangaroo court. When the survivors arrived back on Guam, Captain McVeigh was interrogated there and then brought back to the America to stand trial.
And the other part of the story of the Indianapolis is that it brought the uranium for Little Boy to Tinian.
It only brought about half of the uranium that was used in the Little Boy bomb that was flown to Hiroshima. All the rest of the parts for both bombs and all of the test bombs and everything else were brought to Tinian by either cargo ship or by aircraft. The important parts were flown in on B-29s and on the C-54s that were specially assigned to the Project Alberta team.
All right.
That is the Hiroshima explosion, all right, as it passes through that ultimate layer of the atmosphere there. It breaks a little bit, right? And then the mushroom cloud comes out of the top of it. And it became the significant symbol of atomic warfare. Again, I love this picture. That's Colonel Doolittle. And they're aboard the Hornet just before they took off.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Doolittle is there, right? And he led the mission, and it was tremendously successful. And I'm just like, as I mentioned, I'm now in the process of writing the reconstruction of Guam. And the state in there on the part about the sacrifice of Guam, when all of the military personnel and white civilians on Guam were taken prisoner and put into camps in Japan. These guys did not hit just one target. Each of those aircraft that flew over Japan from the Hornet, they're on board the USS the aircraft carrier US Hornet. All right, every aircraft that flew off of there had a different city. And what they were doing is they were trying to tell everybody in Japan that the time was soon coming when there would be airfields on Tinian, and this is what they would get every day, but 1,000 times more. Yeah. And interestingly enough, I found reports from some of the prisoners from Guam who were being kept in Japanese prison, and when these bombers hit their town, right, and they looked up and they saw that they were American aircraft, there were stars underneath the wings, everybody went crazy because it was the first indication they had that America was actually winning the war or would win the war, because all the propaganda they got was the Japanese were winning and that America would soon withdraw from the war.
Right.
So these guys raised the spirit of all of those American prisoners of war throughout Japan.
How about that? Yeah.
All right, this is the headquarters for the 121st CB Battalion as they landed on Tinian. Saipan, I'm sorry, that's on Saipan.
Okay.
And so these Seabees, right, their responsibility is clearing roads, clearing mines, building stuff like that. But they also have to survive the invasion. And so these particular Marines, along with the 18th Seabee Battalion, 18th was assigned to the 2nd Marine Division. The 121st was assigned to the 4th Marine Division. These particular Seabees not only finished Seabee camp, but they were then sent to Lejeune to go through the Marine basic training. So they were actually Marines while they were here on the beach. They landed as Marines in the United States Marine Corps uniforms as Marines, but they did the job of Seabees and they fought like Marines when necessary. So here they are on the beach, on Saipan, digging in on the very first day that they were there on Saipan.
Oh,
this is back on Tinian, and this is the leadership of the Project Alberta team. They are in the high-tech area, the 1st Ordnance Squadron area, and they are going over the details of the mission. The man on the right hand, let's start on the left-hand side here. The first man on the left, that's Dr. Norman Ramsey. He was the number 2 physicist to Oppenheimer. And he was brought out here to head the physics team that would be assembling the bombs. And sitting next to him is Deke Parsons, the guy with the pin on the paper there, right?
Yeah.
That's Captain Deke Parsons, U.S. Navy. He's the man that actually created the bomb mechanism, the thing that would make it go off, not all of the stuff about the uranium and everything, because he was an ordnance man and he was hired specifically for that purpose with the promise that when the bombs were ready to drop, he would fly with the first bomb, as he did when he created the 5/8" naval gun proximity fuse for the 5" naval gun that was used for the rest of the war, particularly at Okinawa, to protect against kamikazes. Now, the guy on the right's my great-grandfather, General Thomas Farrell. Actually, I have no relation to him. I tried to prove I had a relationship to him, but I'm not. Right? But Brigadier General Farrell was the number 2 guy in the Manhattan Project. He reported only to General Groves. So all of the top dogs from the Manhattan Project, or second to the top dogs, came to Tinian as part of the Project Alberta team, responsible for Operation Centerboard, the assembly and dropping of atomic bombs on Japan. This is just a squadron of B-29s coming back to Tinian, and I just like the picture because there are very few of them available. Nobody took pictures of them returning. They only took pictures of them taking off, but they're coming right over the top of the harbor down below there. Newly constructed harbor. This is a rather famous picture, right? I put it in there because I got a lot of dead Japanese in later chapters, and I thought that it was only appropriate. This is the landing at one of the landing beaches at Tarawa, and we took it pretty bad there. And this picture did appear in Life magazine, or one similar to it, and it just horrified all of the people back home, right? That they actually showed pictures of dead Japanese. On the other hand, it demonstrated that it was not a cakewalk winning this war in the Pacific. And it was from here, because of these losses and other things, that Admiral Spruance wrote a paper called The 18 Lessons Learned from Tarawa. And those became the working lessons for the Seabees and the Marines as they continued to prepare for the other invasions that were coming up. And so learning these lessons the hard way at Tarawa in the long run benefited future invasions.
All right, that gets you to the end of the photos of your book, and this is the
Okay.
cover of your book that CBs and Super Forts at War.
Well, I want to thank you guys very much. The book is available online on eBay
Okay.
at a very reasonable price, and we mail them directly from Tinian.
Okay.
And if the people who buy it on eBay want to have a signature or a creative inscription, if they send it to me, with their order, all right, I'll sign them and give them their inscription.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's great.
That's been a really good review of what happened on Tinian. Don, I appreciate
it.
You did good.
Population of our little island went to over 150,000.
Wow.
I cannot imagine what it was like to have 150,000 people on this island. I mean, we've only got 2,000 here now, and busy in the bank on Monday morning.
That's what I was going to ask. How many people live there now? So.
Oh, there are more than 2,000 people here. There are 2,000 residents. Right. But right now, of course, the island is under reconstruction. Mm-hmm. They're building an Air Force divert facility for refueling tankers at Westfield, where the 58th Bomb Wing was. And up north, the Red Horse teams, the Air Force engineers, the Red Horse teams, are now resurfacing all of Northfield. And it's going to be repaved, and all of the roads at Northfield will be repaved. There are no plans for bringing active duty operations to the island of Tinian. What they're doing, not only on Tinian, but also in Japan, Okinawa, all down the string of islands, Palau, the Philippines, all the way around to Diego Garcia, is preparing old World War II runways for reuse if China wants to pick a fight, right? And they're not making it secret. I mean, anybody can come to Tinian and go to Northfield and take all the pictures they want. They want the Chinese to know that we are preparing. Sure. We don't want to fight, but if you pick a fight, we're not going to be caught flat-footed this time.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Really appreciate it, Don. Let me make one other comment about the Stephen Ambrose historical tours. Sure. They also have one that goes to the Pacific. What will they see when they come to Tinian, Don?
Oh, they'll go to Northfield. They usually come in at the airport early in the morning. Right. And we have a bus waiting for them. And I'm riding on the bus, and I usually bring a couple of my students along, right, so that they can listen and meet, right? We don't get any real veterans anymore. We're getting their sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters, right? Yeah. But they will land in Guam and stay in Guam, and then they'll come to Tinian. And when we get to Tinian, because I meet them in Guam, when we get to Tinian, I take them right straight up to Northfield, and then we look at all of the historic sites at Northfield. We stand at the bomb pits, and it kind of gives you a chill to stand there at the bomb pits. In the bomb pits, I place some photographs of the bomb being loaded to give it a little empathy. And then over at the other pit, the Fat Man bomb is in there. And we spend a day just looking at the historic sites at Northfield. Then we go back to the village and eat lunch at our main restaurant, the JC's Cafe, right? Okay. Eat good local food, right? And then in the after lunch, we go down and visit Suicide Cliff and some of the other sites, Taga House, all the other historic sites on the island.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Don. Appreciate so much you taking the time to be with us today.
And thank you very much, Ray and Keith. Nice to meet you, and I look forward to your visit to Tinian.
Well, that sounds fantastic.
But be careful. You may not decide to go home. It's peaceful here.
I'm sure.
Oh,
all right, very good.
We don't have any Walmart, but we got peace of mind.
There you go. That's right. Who needs Walmart if you got peace of mind?
That's right.
All right, Ray. Who do you have coming up next?
Now, next, we're going to have Anita LaRusso and Summer Porter, and they're going to be talking to us about the program that they have, the Atomic Legacy Preservation Network with DOEEM. So we'll have Anita and Summer next.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, again, Don, thank you so much for getting up so early and joining us.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you very much. I'm going to go out on the balcony, enjoy the sunrise.
All right. Very good. Thank you so much. And folks, thanks for watching. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another Hidden History.